Hi guys, back to Lacan. So, um, in previous videos on Lacan, we talked about the imaginary and how it comes into being, and how ego psychology, which kind of gives too much power to the ego, gives the wrong role to the ego, is not kind of a good enough tool um, to do good psychoanalysis, essentially. So the key insight is that the imaginary is the ego. It's the illusion of the whole. Okay, it's like we go our whole lives living, thinking we are kind of coherent, clear and distinct Cartesian subjects, but that's not the case. Okay, um, there is this chaos. There is this radical difference. Just beneath the imaginary, and it can always kind of come up to the surface. Okay, and we'll talk about the psychoses and neuroses and stuff like that in later videos. So I have mentioned the imaginary roughly being the ego. So if you've read philosophy, like let's say Descartes, you kind of might have a question. Well, doesn't it mean that the imaginary produces the subject? Okay, so we have the ego. Well, and isn't that the subject? And for Lacan, the answer is no, it is not. Hell no is his answer. The subject is not the ego, and in fact, the subject is not a product of the imaginary. Okay, so ego comes from here, from the imaginary. Hope you guys can see my little Google picture. The ego comes from here, but the subject comes from the symbolic. The subject, and by the way, Lacan's concept of the subject is different from the Cartesian subject. Yeah, so that's the key insight. Ego from the imaginary, subject from the symbolic.